Hi, friends. I'm Doris Swift, founder of Fierce Calling Ministries and host of the Fierce Calling podcast. Have you ever felt like you were walking through the wilderness? Maybe you're feeling that way right now. Some people look at the wilderness as a natural, uncultivated place, and some think of the wilderness as a metaphor for being lost and maybe wandering without aim. But I want to encourage you that holy things happen in the wilderness. Some years ago, I was in banking, and it was 29 years of my life that I worked in this career. And when it ended, I felt lost. I didn't realize how much I had allowed my identity to be interwoven with what I did every day, which isn't very healthy, actually. It's not that I didn't have a full life. I'm married to my wonderful husband. We're going for 38 years in August. And I have two grown, amazing kids, and they have families. I love my daughter-in-law and my son-in-law, and then we have 6 grandkids between them. I have a full life, but it just felt strange to me. Strange, like I was walking in a wilderness place that I hadn't been before. And it can happen in any season of our life because sometimes we can go from one job to another job, maybe. Sometimes we can move from one city to another city, or even to another state, or even to another culture, which can really feel like a wilderness place because cultural differences can really be very impactful and really be hard to, at first, become accustomed to. And we have to be careful in the world because we are in the world, but not of the world. So we don't want to just go along with the things of the world. So sometimes there are things in our life that can cause us to feel like we're walking in a desolate place. But as I said earlier, holy things happen in the wilderness. And that is something that we see time and time again in the Word. We see that Jesus, he went off away to a desolate place to pray and spend time with the Father. We know David, he sought refuge in the wilderness. And we know that God met Moses in the wilderness and he spoke to Moses in the wilderness. God struck rocks in the wilderness and abundant water flowed to quench the thirst of his people. Abundant, comparative to oceans of water, is how the word says. And it's encouraging to me, and I hope it's encouraging to you, because when we're in the wilderness, it doesn't mean we're lost, and it doesn't mean that we're going to stay in the wilderness forever, but there's a reason for us being there. So when we think about a wilderness place, maybe it's a struggle we're going through. Maybe we have gone through a loss. And it can be a loss of a loved one. It could be a loss of a job or a home or relationship. We deal with a lot of that in our lifetime. And Jesus told us in this world we would have trouble. And a wilderness place can seem lonely even when we're in a crowd of people. When we're in a crowd of people, we can feel like nobody sees us. But that isn't true, because God sees us and he knows our pain and he knows what we're going through. And we can't even trust our own hearts, right? That's what the word tells us, that our hearts can be really deceiving to us even. But God knows our hearts and he knows what we need. Just like when he struck the rocks and the water flowed out. And we can be assured that the water that we receive from our rock, the rock of our salvation, the Lord, who is our rock, is living water. So when we think about a wilderness place, perhaps we don't feel like we're walking through one right now, but maybe there's someone that God is going to put in your path today even who is experiencing a wilderness place in their life. And maybe God has called us to be the hands and feet of Jesus to share the living water that that person walking in the wilderness needs. And sometimes the wilderness can be a place where we're tested, and tests aren't a bad thing because when our faith is tested, it's strengthened. And we can't expect to pass faith tests in the wilderness if we are wandering from the one who can walk us through the wilderness in our lives. So we need to really be in the Word, walk with Him, walk in the Spirit, listen to the voice of God, and really, really dig deep and seek an intimacy with the Lord, even deeper than the day before. And it's so possible. And you know why it's possible? Because He wants it. He invites us in. He invites us to come to Him. And sometimes it takes a wilderness place for us to seek it. Isn't that true? So holy things happen in the wilderness. And I love when we read about how God spoke to Moses in the wilderness. And this verse here, the people stood far off while Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was. This is at the time where God was calling Moses up to the mountain to meet with him. And he was going up and down the mountain and sharing the message that God gave him with the people. And the people were frightened because when God's presence was there, I mean, it was just like everything was shaking, and God was there in fire and thick smoke. The presence was powerful, and it frightened the people. And it frightened them probably because of their sin, but also because God is a God to be reverenced. We need to reverence God. And that fear need not be a fear being afraid of God, but a fear being reverence of Him and reverent of Him. And so Moses told them not to fear, but God was wanting to do a work because He wanted them to fear Him in a way that would allow them not to sin, because He loved them and He loves us. So when sometimes we feel like we're walking through a wilderness, perhaps it's a test, and perhaps it's because God is calling us from sin and closer to Him. And that is only possible because of Jesus going to the cross for us and being our high priest and sacrificing His life and taking on our sin so that we can be reconciled with an intimate relationship with the Father, our Father, who art in heaven. And God is with us. So we can remember that holy things happen in the wilderness. Holy things happen in the wilderness. We know that God speaks in the wilderness, like He spoke to Moses. He speaks to us in our wilderness places. We know that David sought refuge in the wilderness, a place of safety. We know that God struck those rocks to provide living water flowing for His people in the wilderness. And we can be assured that God is with us in the wilderness. He walks with us in the wilderness, and He doesn't leave us alone in the wilderness. And so if you're walking through a place right now where it feels like a wilderness to you, that you're not sure what your next step is to be, just know that God is walking there, and He is going before you, and He knows what you're going through, and He sees you. El Roi, the God who sees you right where you are, and seek Him, because the wilderness is a place where we can seek and draw near. Because every day can't be a mountaintop experience. Although in our life, we can look at the big picture that God has us a part of, and we can experience that joy that He gave us so that our joy would be full. Because it tells us that, Jesus told us that in John 15. So friend, be assured that God walks with us in the wilderness. We can hear Him speak in the wilderness places, and He will meet us in the thick darkness. The thick darkness. And He's light, and there's no darkness in Him. Just because there was darkness around the environment that they were witnessing there on the mountain, it wasn't God that was dark. It was just the place of the thick, dark clouds. And we know that there's no dark in God. God is light and God is love, and he loves us. So when you're feeling like you're walking through the wilderness, be sure to reach out to a friend. Be sure to go to a trusted friend and ask for prayer, and someone that you know that you could share your heart with. And first of all, though, first and foremost, go to the Lord in prayer and say, God, I feel like I'm walking in this wilderness. I feel like I'm alone. I feel like I have no direction here and I feel lost. Can you help me, Lord? Help me get back on track. Help me find my way back to you. And we can be assured that God will use the twists and turns in our journey to lead us right back to him. So be encouraged today that God meets us in wilderness places.